And we're back, and you are listening to Villaincast, BJJ Anti-Heroes, with myself, Chris the Villain Pains, and welcome to the State of the Union. So, it has been a crazy couple of weeks. I've been travelling across Europe, to parts of Europe I wouldn't have been able to find on a map up until recently, more on that later, which has meant there is no Reap of the Week this week, or special guests. You are stuck with me. This is a show from the road. I'm about to go out and do one last little trip into Europe for a while. So I thought this was kind of a prime time to talk about where we've come from since we brought this podcast back 22 weeks ago, I think it is now. We're, I think, about 22 episodes in since the podcast came back alive again, and it's been fantastic. So the numbers of listeners to this have increased about 20-fold since we brought it back, which is utterly insane. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening to this this thing we've created. Thank you for joining onto the videos and the Patreon. That again, more on that later. But that's I'm really enjoying that, and I'm really looking forward to where this podcast is going. So when it came back, I wasn't really thinking about kind of a general direction. I kind of knew that I wanted to get interesting coaches in and talk about just coaching practices, not just talking to athletes or anything like that, but right, how do we actually get people more fired up in jiu-jitsu and open up new avenues of learning? But it's just so much bigger than that. It's given me a whole new appreciation for teaching and training in jiu-jitsu. For example, it won't be too long, hopefully it's you never know with these things, trying to arrange guests. We've even got nutritionists coming on, hopefully, to talk about not just healthy eating, but also the psychology of nutrition. And that's one thing that when I was talking about this with this person, I remember when I first started training in jiu-jitsu and competing and cutting weight, it was very unhealthy. And I don't know if we've really moved on as a sport since then. It's very much bro science in that way, in that you get ideas from other people in the gym. I mean, sure, there's some really good nutritional advice out there in combat sports, but it's not always taken or easily found. And if only I'd known how much that was going to mess me up. And I give me such an unhealthy attitude towards food in that way that, cause a kind of bouncing around of weight, and instead of just finding something that was psychologically healthy. So I'm really excited to have that conversation and put that into the world. Also, just is being able to look after your body in jiu-jitsu. I'm really excited to talk to people about athlete health. Again, it's one of those things that, being a young man in my 20s, thinking I was invincible, and very much not being, and thinking that general trauma, including to the head, was okay. And now I look at the folks in my gym, and I'm looking at them doing similar mistakes to what I said, and I have to try and convince them, no, you are not invincible. Chill the fuck out. Let's not do this to ourselves. And I appreciate this podcast for allowing me the platform to talk to those people. So it's so cool, and I'm sorry this is going to seem like a crazy rant for the next 30 minutes, but it's a State of the Union. Where are we at? So yeah, athlete health and coaching. That's being able to talk to those people. Again, if you can check out the Josh Janis podcast with breath work and anxiety control. I would have never thought when we first brought this back in May that was even going to be a possibility, but here we are. I also want to talk about how training has changed. So especially with the conversations with Greg Souders and Rob Bianacchi and Rob Cole, being able to look at new ways of coaching. And that's fundamentally changed how I now operate in my gym, and how to create a different team environment that is healthier for everyone involved. And I think the big change with that, which then improved all other aspects of jiu-jitsu, is this idea that we are a team. I know it's easy to say that we're all parts of teams, but that only seems to apply when we get to competitions or the uniforms that we wear. But when we get on the mats, we abuse each other to the point where it becomes quite toxic. I said this before, so if you haven't tuned into that the previous podcast, it's probably on the Reap of the Week somewhere. This idea that there's a hierarchy in the gym, and that your main, I think it was the Rob Bianacchi podcast where he said, for everyone, not everyone, for most people, your main form of competition is your own team, and you have a hierarchy in the gym, and we try and keep ourselves in that hierarchy. You look at people above you and think, I'm coming for you, because that's maybe how you get your next belt. And then you look at people below you and you think, right, you're staying down there. I'm in the hierarchy, and I'm going to climb this hierarchy. And especially because we compete, and it's all manner of weights, genders, ages. It's a way of, jiu-jitsu is a game of power. It's how much we can create power and negate someone else's power. And because of that, when we compete, we are essentially trying to cancel out the athleticism power aspect. And so we can just measure skill level by and large. Obviously, power is always going to be a factor in it, but when you're someone who's a similar weight and age and gender, it takes that out of it. It's very similar to competitive cycling in that we're trying to measure the athlete, not the athlete plus the bike. And so all the bikes have a weight limit of how light they can be, or horse racing where the jockeys have to weigh in. And so you're then measuring the horse and not horse and jockey. Like you could have a super light jockey that would give a horse an advantage. It's the exact same with combat sports in this way, is that if we try and cancel out as much as we can in regards to weight and power, we can measure the skill level. But that goes the second we enter the gym. And as soon as we walk into our dojos or whatever, we try and keep ourselves in that hierarchy. And that then becomes toxic, and that's when people get hurt. And seeing that and understanding that, and then going, actually, no, we're taking this out. Sorry. We're going to take the hierarchy out of this gym. We are a team. It's a rising tide. If we all get better, if we help each other improve and take our, again, one of those famous things in jiu-jitsu, leave your ego at the door. It's the most hilarious thing to hear, because we very much bring our ego with us, especially when it comes to this hierarchy and you start to get colored belts around your waist. The analogy that I help to give this idea is the one of my son, where he's 9, depending when you listen to this, and I want to improve him playing football in goal. I can either blast the ball at him, kick over his head, or kick it off the field, or just abuse the fact that I am the adult in this exchange. Or I can kick the ball at the goal, which in a way that he may or may not save it, but there's a chance he could. And if I can do that with him, then he will get better over time to the point where he may start saving it. And it also helps him, say if you had a game tomorrow, that he's now got experience in goal, Because if I was just chipping over his head for an hour, that's not helping him. And if you take that into every exchange in the gym, where there is an adult and child dynamic, there is a power dynamic. It's up to the stronger powered individual to look after the lower one and build them up. And eventually, if you build them up enough, they'll start testing you, which makes you improve. Obviously, that then builds the entire gym up. I think that, I'm always open to improvement, but that alone has improved the gym culture so much. And it's so easy to get stuck into the ideas that you only improve jiu-jitsu through techniques and techniques alone, when there's so much ancillary stuff that completely ignores technique. And just including that into the training environment has made everyone better. It's brought everyone up faster. And hopefully this, again, I want this platform to be able to spread those ideas out there. So if anyone's listened to this and you want to comment, send me a message. If you'd be able to implement similar ideas, I'd be really, really interested in hearing about that. It's also given me a completely different appreciation for fundamentals, in that it's easy when we talk about fundamentals in the sense of a basic beginner's class of, okay, here's close guard, half guard, butterfly guard, side control, mount, back mount, armbar, rear naked choke, triangle. That's normally the idea of fundamentals. And it kind of sets us up in the future then for, we have base classes. I mean, again, put your hand up if this sounds anywhere near familiar. We have fundamentals classes where you're learning all these basic movements and positions. And then you have advanced classes, which are inverted shit, which, whatever that means. And complex guards. When, in fact, I would say you need to go back a step. And the idea that fundamentals is balance, posture, alignment, being upright, true conceptual beginnings. Again, I have analogies for everything. I guess it's just my way of seeing the world. And the one I use for this is the idea of the bonsai tree, of all the kind of techniques you have in jiu-jitsu, especially when it comes to defense. They're leaves on the end of branches. And to paraphrase horrendously Kurt Osiander on this, when he used to say, if anyone ever asks him the question, like, how do you defend a rear naked choke? He'd refuse to answer and say, well, I could show you, but people are still taking your back. How about we stop people taking your back and figure that problem out? Because then it stops everything bad happening from your back. I like that idea, but then that completely changes how you have to train. Is that snipping a leaf off is going to be very detail orientated, whilst cutting down a branch, like stopping people taking your back in the first place, that's more of a grind. That's a completely different set of knowledge tools. And I like the idea then of working our way back down that bonsai tree. So you could then look at, okay, well, if we work on guard retention, then no one's taking our back or getting mount or side control or anything. So would it make more sense then to spend, if you want to kill everything, spend longer hacking down that very large branch? So what's the base of the tree? What's the very bottom that if we cut this down, everything dies? And that is balance, posture, and alignment. Is my ability to stay upright, my ability to keep my back postured. And that doesn't mean that just posturing up like you're doing close guard. I mean keeping a good neutral spine that allows for power creation. And then alignment. So having your joints aligned, that makes it difficult for your balance to be broken. Again, going back to what I said earlier, this is a game of power. And it is our job to maximize our ability to create power and negate someone else's. And unfortunately, jiu-jitsu very much became the cult of the guard. And by that, I mean compared to other grappling arts like judo and wrestling, guard is kind of our unique selling point in that they don't really use a guard. Wrestling definitely doesn't, and judo had one, but it's kind of definitely fallen by the wayside on that one. So we have guard, and we can do a lot of cool stuff from guard, except we kind of got stuck in that, and we just became obsessed with guard to the detriment of everything else, including our connection to reality, as it were, when it came to effective fighting. And going back to what I said about power creation and negation, if I can, I've used these numbers before just because it's easy maths in my head. Say if you imagine a fulcrum and a lever, if you have a power level of 4 and you move down the lever away from the fulcrum, it's a multiplier of your power. So for example, if you look at an elbow and you move down the elbow towards the fingers, as you get towards the fingers, it's a further along the lever, and your power level has now gone from 4 to 16. But then say you come across someone who is already at 16. They could go halfway up the lever and still be at 32. If they go all the way up to the end and times it by 4, they're at 64 now. There's no way your 16 is going to be that 64. You're doomed. So it's your job to try and maximize your ability to use power and negate theirs as much as possible and hope the numbers match up. And again, if we were in space and I pushed you, we'd both fly off in different directions, but that's not the case. We are connected to the ground. And so my ability to generate power is my body and postural alignment connected to the ground that allows me to generate force and power. And if you've ever lifted anything in the gym, you make sure you have good postural alignment, good spine, good back, and good alignment with your joints to be able to create enough power to execute your lift. As soon as you start messing with your posture and alignment, that lift drops. And here we are in a sport that requires power creation, and we can completely mess up our posture and alignment. And that's why we put people on the ground, because it disconnects them from that battery. Okay, sure, they can push with their legs because their back is connected to the battery, connected to the ground, but their ability to generate force is a lot less. That's why we do jiu-jitsu. We take people to the ground for this very reason. But we got stuck in that messaging, and we think it's okay to be on our back, when in fact, against someone who has balance, who isn't going to fall over, who can stay connected to the ground, has posture and alignment that allows them to maximize their ability to generate power, being on your back is a terrible idea. It is so bad, because if you cannot affect this person's posture and balance, you have no hope, and they're gonna to beat the shit out of you. Bad plan. And because it's when we talk, this whole thing is talking about fundamentals, because these things are mildly talked about but then completely glossed over, because we are obsessed as a sport with technique, instead of good conceptual movement. It gets forgotten, and we then have people who fall over, who have poor power creation, and with that we then think our fighting from our back is good, and then we come across people who do MMA, wrestlers, judoka, who don't fall over, and all of a sudden we realize actually we're training against people who are not fundamentally sound, which then gives us a full sense of how good we actually are. That's kind of embarrassing. I know there's that video recently, is it Jesse Enkamp, who, the karate guy, who went to a competition and he just thought, I'm just going to stand up. And, I don't know, his pretty experienced. I think he did a bit of MMA. He's done obviously a lot of karate, but that's not grappling. And he just stood up, and it completely flummoxed and bamboozled everyone involved. I think he won or something stupid, or at least he got a medal. And come on, if karate people are now laughing at us, that's pretty terrible. We need to fix this. We need to fix this as a sport. So I like this idea of, okay, let's fix our fundamentals. Again, back to analogy town. One of the things that I picked up from the fire service, I know it's featured everywhere, but I guess they were really big into teaching stuff, is this idea of conscious competence. And by that I mean the first level is unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. You can look at a car and go, I don't know how that works. Like, okay. Or just cars that go past and you don't even realize that you don't know how that works. You then get in a car for the first time and a driving instructor explains to you, right, here's the pedals, here's the steering wheel, the gear stick, if you're in in the rest of the world, not America, the stick shift, etc., etc. And you go, right, okay, cool. You told me all these things. I don't know how to move this car. You are consciously incompetent. I think I said unconsciously incompetent on the previous one. Yeah. So now you've gone from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent. You're now starting to learn to drive the car, and you can now turn, indicate, etc. You're now consciously competent. You can drive, but you have to think about it. Which means that anything other than like driving and operating that car, such as good hazard perception and reading the road ahead, too much, way too much, we're still driving this car around, just getting used to the movement of it. And then eventually you become so good at driving that car and so comfortable and confident with it, you become unconsciously competent. You can just operate that car. And at that point, you can then look into other things like, turning on the heated seats, looking for hazard perception, adjusting things, I don't know, whatever people do in cars. Now look at that when it comes to your jiu-jitsu. Is your posture, your back alignment, your joint alignment and your balance good enough that you could keep them without having to think about them? And I say this from a point of view that from doing a lot of this now, I am still realizing that I am just about consciously competent in my own body. I can't think ahead at all right now. I just have to maintain this. And then eventually I may start be able to bring techniques back into it and playing with GPS and changing the radio. But right now, my body fundamentals are terrible. And that is the base of the tree, is that if you can have good posture, balance, and alignment, maximize your ability to generate power, you have a better shot at jiu-jitsu. Because if people can't get you to the ground, they ain't doing anything to you. And so I've just been in Europe. I was in Switzerland doing the offense-defense camp with Sven Grotten. He's a good friend of mine. He's a fantastic grappler from Cologne. I very much recommend checking him out, going to his gym. He is a beast. And also just a really smart guy when it comes to grappling arts. I can't really sing his praises enough. Then I've been in Tbilisi in Georgia in Eastern Europe. I did find it kind of hilarious that I was going to Georgia, a country known for its wrestling and its judo, to talk about standing up in jiu-jitsu. I did appreciate how insane that sounded. And finally, I've just been across Germany in Munich and Hamburg. Again, spreading the good word and just doing this one seminar of, right, let's appreciate what good fundamentals feels like. And each time, I think it becomes very apparent how much once you've felt it, it becomes very difficult to go back to normal rolling of playing guard and falling over. I even did a bit of an experiment in the last seminar I did in Hamburg, which was, we did a 3-hour class on this, and then the final half an hour, I said, right, roll, just humor me. Don't fall over. Keep your balance. Be conscious of your posture and alignment at all times. What happens? And after a 5-minute roll, I think one of the purple belts in attendance turned to me and went, do a lot of people throw up when you teach like this? And I was like, weirdly enough, yes. It's difficult. I know, I've realized. I then said, right, same roll, but I want one of you to forget the last 3 hours and just roll like you did yesterday. One person, you've just been to the seminar, remain as clued in as you are. And they did that, and then they swapped. I went, it feels weird, doesn't it? It feels weird to go back to how you rolled before. And this is a good mix of students. Those students that have been there for 10 years, 12 years, or, even the main coach had been there for 20 years. And they were like, yeah, it feels weird to go back to not being consciously competent of our bodies, being aware of our posture and balance and how much that affects the role. And I really appreciate that, and thought it made me think that I want to carry on doing this seminar. I want to make it into something bigger, and spread this idea. I know that Rob Bianacchi does talk about this a lot. I haven't watched much of his stuff at all. I imagine there's a convergence somewhere. But then tying this onto the Preet stuff and how you can go from the Preet stuff offensively back into using posture and balance to then turn the Preet stuff quite offensive. These are quite new ideas. I'm using them in the gym quite a lot. But if you are a member of the Patreon channel, we're currently doing How to Defend Everything 3.0, and it's a part of that. And I want, if you're signed up onto the Patreon, these videos coming out. So I'd like to hear your feedback if that's all available. When it comes to the gym, this is pretty much all we've been doing, and it's made me realize that how I may know a lot of technique, but that it's not fundamentally sound, and it's really making me reevaluate my understanding of jiu-jitsu entirely. And so then to go out into the world and then test these ideas on seminars, I'm very appreciative. It's going to be a busy calendar. I am looking at coming back into Europe over December. I'm currently booked in Florence and a couple of opportunities around Germany. So if anyone wants to have a chat with me, I'm very much up for talking about this style of training and paying a visit. And that leads on to, so I'm trying to then turn this into a book, and I've been starting to write it, and it's made it very difficult to then, because I want to redo almost Jiu-Jitsu University. Like, how would you learn Jiu-Jitsu from a beginner and up? And it made me appreciate that actually looking at submissions, how many submissions don't work for starters? Or you have to be really lucky and hope the other person's pretty stupid. To what would I abandon? And there's a lot of jiu-jitsu I'd kind of abandoned now. Even with my own classes, I've abandoned so much stuff that just doesn't work. Side control, it's not there. It doesn't make any sense. So how the hell do I then gauge students for promotions, which is kind of an interesting one as well, is that could I give someone a blue belt or purple belt who I've not ever taught side control to? Because I know we're supposed to be doing jiu-jitsu, and there's a certain level of appreciation of someone's knowledge of jiu-jitsu when you find out their belt color. But how would you feel if you came across a blue belt or purple belt who didn't know what half guard was, or close guard, or side control? They had this fundamentally insane jiu-jitsu that made them very impossible to put down, and they were very good at control, very free flow of their control. They understand fundamentally what control is about, but they don't understand the generic positions. Do I have to show them those positions? Am I obligated for tradition? I don't know. I'm trying to figure that one out. And it's forming a part of the book, really. It's quite interesting where that direction's going of, okay, could we redo that famous book of Jiu-Jitsu University with no jiu-jitsu involved? It's an interesting undertaking that I thought would be a lot simpler than it is, and it's turning out to be quite complicated. I'm going to be, again, posting videos on these ideas onto the Patreon and try and get feedback. I'm excited. I'm nervous. I want to see how this goes, but it's also scaring me and frustrating me on how it's shaping up, because it's making me evaluate what is important in jiu-jitsu now. And could that even be construed as jiu-jitsu anymore? Which is very curious. Part of that idea as well was to make the documentary of, could we take a bunch of beginners, people who have no grappling experience, into an 8-week course and teach them this style of jiu-jitsu, and what would they look like at the end of it? Wow. I think the only reason we haven't really done it is because I've been quite busy with bookings for seminars. I want to make sure that I'm there every week to be able to do this. But I guess with the winter coming up, it should be pretty easy to pull this off. And it's going to be we've been testing a lot of the recording equipment and how it comes out, and it's been getting more and more interesting because we're starting to record classes. Okay, so I want it to look good. I want to be able to edit it together, and people go, right, get a fair understanding of this beginner course and see what actually happens to people. So that is coming. It hasn't been forgotten. Still making headway towards it, and it's very much tied in with the book. It's tied in with the classes currently. It's tied in with this whole system of, right, what if you abandoned jiu-jitsu entirely, didn't introduce jiu-jitsu the way it is currently to these people, and we did fundamentally sound conceptual movement? What do they look like? It all will all be recorded. I'm now recording classes as well, for people to check this kind of information out. So my voice is going. It sounds terrible. I'm gonna have to listen to this back. This may be the huskiest audio recording of podcast we've ever done. We, as in me, we'll see. So yeah, that's the current state of the union. I put it down to this podcast. I mean, we had the Fanatics out, we had the YouTube channel kind of chugging along, videos popping up whenever I felt like it, more in the past, and now it's definitely changed. It's becoming very frequent. The Patreon channel, which is maybe really a question of my understanding of jiu-jitsu, because I like having those people there, supporting, that I can then bounce these ideas off and do online coaching with, and get their feedback on how the stuff is working out for them. Funny enough, there are a couple of people who I've taught this idea to over the weekend seminars, such as in Georgia, and the feedback getting from them is that they are now being accused of being good wrestlers. They have no previous wrestling experience. I didn't teach wrestling, but they're now wrestlers, apparently. I find that bizarre. I find that bizarre that you can come across someone who has not done wrestling, is not doing takedowns, who's just remaining balanced and postured and upright, and, oh, you're a wrestler. No, I just don't fall over. That's terrifying to think of jiu-jitsu this way. So yeah, I blame the podcast mostly for this. It's definitely opened up a lot of conversations, especially being able to bounce ideas off Naki in a public forum, getting people to ask questions on their thoughts on jiu-jitsu, and us to go, right, what do you think? And be able to talk to such fantastic guests. Please, I've got, obviously many in the pipeline. That's just finding scheduling that allows for it. If you have anyone you'd like to hear me talk to, please just drop me a line, drop them a line, get us to talk to each other. I'm very hopefully excited to be able to talk to people about this. Thank you for your time. This is a different take on a podcast, just myself ranting. If you've enjoyed it, if it has made sense, if there's other things you'd like me to kind of do with these State of the Unions, again, let me know. I do pay attention to the feedback. I'm not the best at replying to stuff. I am bouncing around an awful lot. I get fried in that way. I am trying to get better. But please give me feedback. I do read it, and I will try and improve. And if this has been anyway useful, if this piqued your curiosity with various things, let me know. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sticking around and being part of this creation. Really, I don't really know what other else to describe it. Thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me. And yeah, hopefully see you out on the road. See you on the online coaching. Talk to you online. You all mean so much to me. Thank you. This has been a State of the Union address from myself, Christopher Villain Paynes, on Villaincast. Thank you.